hunting,
fishing,
cooking,
camping,
conservation,
travel,
gardening,
photography, family.
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 This is the Outdoor Rules Podcast. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Outdoor Rules Podcast. This is Mike here, as usual, joined today by basically the normal cast. Poppy's here.
Hello.
Mark.
Hello.
And Matt.
Hello.
So it's the Rule Boys and Poppy, basically, is what you got. And we wanted to get together today, and kind of because we're looking at the summer coming up and starting to make plans, and we always think about beach trips in the summer. And it's got us talking lately about a place that I feel like that our saltwater fishing for Matt and Mark and I, at least this is how I feel, really started. And Matt actually suggested this as an episode, and I think it's a great idea. But we wanted to talk about Broadkill Beach, Delaware, which is a place that we started going basically as early as I can remember. Matt, do you feel like you remember a time when we didn't go down there?
No, I don't think I remember before we really started going there. I think I remember a little bit of saltwater fishing before that, but not much before that.
Yeah, like I remember fishing other places, but, if I really had to recall, I wouldn't really know maybe which one came first, right?
Yeah, that's about how I feel.
Yep. And then, Mark, you surely don't remember a time before we went. You must have almost been born when we started going.
Yeah, I don't remember a time before we were going there. My first
memory, like you were probably already born is what I meant to say.
Right. My first memories of the beach were there at Broadkill.
I still got that wrong, by the way. You probably were not born when we started going there.
Correct.
To Broadkill?
Yeah.
Well, no, he was born at that point. And the reason that I know that is we would go camping at Indian River. And your mother, we went, and you guys went to Indian River, like you had previously said you went with Pop Grant and stayed in the camper that one time, had a story about that.
Yeah, so you're recalling the Pop Grant episode that came out a couple weeks ago.
Yes.
Matt and I were talking about a story there with Pop Grant at Indian River Inlet, Delaware.
Yes, and we would go there and camp. And Mark was born, and we went down there to camp and fish. And your mother said, "This is it. If you don't find me a place to stay, I'm not going to drag these 4 kids along. We need a house somewhere."
Mom was done camping with 4 children.
Well, that's what she said. I think maybe I could have talked her into it, but it would have been difficult. But it just so happened that weekend, some of our friends came past to visit us. And it was Catherine Schutt and Leonard. And they said, they maybe know a place up at Broadkill. And we went up and visited and kind of fell in love with Broadkill and with the place they had to rent. And we started renting it. And we rented it a lot of times for a couple weeks in the summer. And it was really nice because you could look out the kitchen window and see the beach and see the kids playing on the beach. So it was really good for us with the children. And of course, your mother liked that a lot better than camping in a tent. So,
well, I don't think that was limited to my mother.
No.
I think everybody liked it better.
Yeah, I've chosen to suppress those memories.
The camping memories, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of camping stories, but I think we're talking about Broadkill today.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So, Dad, the geography of this, a few episodes back, we talked quite a bit about the lower Chesapeake Bay, which is bordered essentially where we go at Cape Charles on both sides by Virginia, but the eastern shore of the Chesapeake Bay is the Delmarva Peninsula, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia Peninsula, right? We're now talking about the other side of the Delmarva Peninsula, farther north and farther east, correct?
Correct. It would be the western side of the Delaware Bay.
Right. So we're talking about, and we'll get into this, but a small town on the Delaware Bay, near the mouth of the Delaware Bay, called Broadkill. But even closer to the mouth of the bay is another town called Lewis.
Yeah, some people call it Lewes and some people call it Lewis.
You know, I've met somebody who grew up in that area, and I've had this conversation, and I just looked it up again. And I think the correct pronunciation, the local pronunciation, is Lewis. I don't think it's Lewes like I used to think it is. I think it's Lewis.
Yeah, I don't know.
That town, the town of Lewis, is basically right on the mouth of the bay, right?
Yes.
And there's a ferry that runs from Lewis, Delaware to Cape May, New Jersey.
Yes.
That still operates, right?
Yes.
Have you ever taken that ferry?
Oh, yes. Not many times, but yeah, we've done it a few times.
I actually don't remember ever being on the ferry.
I mean, if you're going from like southern New Jersey to somewhere in Delaware or Delmarva Peninsula, that saves a lot of time rather than going the whole way up around the northern part of the Delaware Bay, which is basically taking you up close to Philadelphia and
right
back down. It saves a lot of time. Yeah.
And the Delaware Bay, obviously, as you just mentioned, is the head of the bay is near Philly there, where the Delaware River comes in, which is the river that's the border between Pennsylvania and New Jersey, going really far north, right?
Yes.
And then the mouth of the bay where it hits the ocean is down where we're talking about.
Yes.
And there aren't very many bridges over the bay, right?
I don't know if there's any.
No, I don't think there's any bridges.
When you get up near Philadelphia, there are bridges, but south of that, there aren't any.
And so you said you guys went over to Broadkill, and if it was when Mark was born, the year Mark was born or thereabouts, it would have been like late 80s, 1986, 1987, right?
Yes.
Describe the town of Broadkill when we started going there.
When we first went there, it was a seaside or a bayside town that was fairly common at that time. The houses that were there were single-story houses, most of them, not all of them, but the older ones were single-story houses that may have been there for 50, 60, 100 years. No basement, sometimes close to the beach, but there was a lot of beach erosion there. So actually, when we started going there was a house right down from where we stayed that was out over the water that was no longer livable because the water was washing away underneath and washing the house away. And the road went to the north a little bit and the road went to the south a little bit. And when I say a little bit, I'm guessing but maybe a mile. And then it dead ended. And eventually they put a road through to the northern end, but not to the southern end, because the southern end went down close to the inlet that was at Lewes, but it was just an old town. It had one little store at the end of it, and it was about 5 or 6 miles off the main highway.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and it was one of the things I remember was it was basically just kind of a collection of houses that were not fancy, right?
Yes.
And there was a general store there.
Yes.
Matt or Mark, what do you guys remember about the general store in Broadkill?
It was what you would think of. What you would think of as like a small town general store. It had a little bit of everything. You could get live bait, crabbing supplies, knickknacks, some souvenirs, some groceries. I think ice cream.
So, Dad, that house, you mentioned Catherine and Leonard Schutt, who are very, very dear family friends. Our families have been friends for a long time, and I think we've mentioned them before. There's a connection by blood to them. They're distant relatives as well. But what was their connection to Broadkill, like, and specifically that house that we stayed at?
They had other relation that lived there. The Hilligosses lived there, and they were related to the Schutts, and they knew that they rented some houses there on the beach, and through them we rented the house that we stayed in.
So they were full-time. They were full-time residents of Broadkill.
Yes, they were.
They didn't Oh, they didn't actually own the house we stayed in, though.
Yeah, and
No,
They just
managed
managed it for somebody else.
and I guess to go back to it, I would get, this is a pure guess, but if there were 100 houses in Broadkill, there might have been 10 or 20 people that lived there permanently. Most of them were summer cottages and things like that.
Yeah, they probably weren't really winter. They really weren't designed for winter, a lot of them.
No, most of them were
They
not.
probably had to drain the water in the wintertime in most of those places.
I mean, to add early, there were maybe a few not new, but nicer houses starting to be developed in Broadkill. But back at that time, there were very few as compared to now.
And the Hilligosses, those were the folks that lived back on the canal, right?
Yes.
So they were like 2 blocks off the water or something.
Yeah, that's probably about right.
Yeah, if that far. Maybe 2 blocks.
But anyway, my point was just that part of Broadkill that we stayed in was between the beach and a canal, and like you're saying, that it was only like 3 or 4 houses deep at that spot, and we could go fishing right out in front of the house, or we could go back, and because we knew the Hilligosses, we could go essentially right down their driveway, and they had a dock on the canal where there was very good crabbing for blue crabs.
Yes, very good crabbing. That's one of my earliest memories from there is all the crabbing that we did.
Right, which was like a really attractive thing when you were a kid. It was something pretty simple, even more simple than fishing, and probably even more safe from the standpoint that there weren't hooks with barbs and all that other stuff involved.
And being that it was, my earliest memories, when we had the boat down there, Pop Grant, as we've discussed in earlier episodes, didn't love being in the boat. So a lot of times he was left to sit, he would stay back and fish from shore. And for Liz, our cousin Liz, who is my age, we could convince Poppy to take us crabbing fairly easily. So that was, and you guys would be off, wherever you guys were at, that was what he would take us to do.
I think maybe we want to explain crabbing a little bit because there's a lot of different ways that we do that. But I think what we're talking about in this case, where you tie a fish head to the end of a string or any other kind of bait and a sinker and throw it out and wait for the crabs to come and grab a hold of that, and then you pull the string in and hopefully net them before they let go.
Like they'll hold on to whatever the bait you mentioned, fish head, or we used chicken necks, or I guess that was it. Pretty much we used fish guts or chicken as bait.
And I mean, it's not, we didn't use crab pots or we didn't use trot lines or things like that down there. It was
all hand lining.
So all you really needed was a kite string and a weight and a piece of bait and then a net to dip the crabs with.
Yes.
Which was a lot of fun when we were kids.
Yeah, I really enjoyed crabbing.
And those were pretty much all in the canals. So, yeah, I guess kind of the chronology of fishing there. I mean, we did a lot of fishing right in front of the house. And I don't know, you guys, Matt or Dad or Mark, somebody kind of describe that.
Anybody want a shot at it?
I mean, I didn't do nearly as much of that fishing as you guys did, but it was surf fishing. My memories of it were sand spikes. You take a couple sand spikes out and we're throwing high-low rigs or fish finder rigs with cut bait or squid, or we didn't really use much shrimp.
No.
And then just casting out and letting it soak. Not so much at that time throwing Hopkins lures, metals and stuff, but not a ton of soft plastics and not stuff like that at that time.
It was mostly surf fishing with bait. And I think the other big one is anything that we could get in a throw net. We rented the place one time for 2 months in the fall. That was September and October. And it just so happened the very first weekend I got there was a big run of mullet coming down the bay, heading out the ocean. And I threw the throw net on and got a tremendous amount. I mean, you could almost have trouble lifting the net with the mullet. Usually you only get a couple at a time. But anyhow, I took a lot of those and probably left half of them go, but took the other bunch and put them into plastic bags with like half a dozen in a plastic bag and stuck them in the freezer at the house. And I used that bait for 2 months, and that was probably one of the best baits I had.
So, Matt, why don't you're kind of the biggest fishing gear nerd, launch into this just a little bit, because I suspect there's probably a fair number of people that don't know what we mean by surf fishing. And, we threw out a couple terms there like sand spikes and high-low rigs, and just take us through the gear a little bit.
Well, typically a surf rod's 10 or 12 foot long. We almost always use spinning tackle, spinning reel, but you definitely can use a conventional reel. Takes a little more practice in casting, a little more difficult. I think we typically stuck to spinning tackle. And then a sand spike is, we used to make our own, a 2-inch PVC pipe, and you just cut an angle to a point on one end that you would stick into the sand, try to get that down in there 6 inches to a foot so that it holds. And then that's designed so that you can cast out and put the rod down. You put the rod in the tube so you don't have to hold it the whole time. As far as the rigs, you're typically with surf fishing using some kind of a sinker that holds bottom. So either a pyramid sinker, or they do make them with prongs on that grab bottom so that it holds tight. And then there's multiple different kind of hook variations and setups. I would say almost always down there that I remember fished a 2-hook rig of some sort, where when you say high-low, that means you have a hook one above the other, 18 inches apart or something to that effect, with a piece of bait on each hook. So you could catch 2 fish at a time, and occasionally that would happen.
To add to what Matt said, typically when you say a surf rod, that's for fishing somewhere in the ocean where you have waves, and you typically have a long surf rod so that you can hold the line above the waves after you cast out and get your sinker to hold. It also helps you to cast further with a longer rod.
Right. So, surf fishing is done from the beach, basically from the surf.
Yeah.
And Broadkill was a little different than fishing in the ocean because we did have some waves. We'd have waves if there was a strong wind, but usually the waves were very small there. You didn't have to worry about that. You could actually get away with
I think we might have fished with 8 or 9 foot rods there sometime.
But you're taking a big, heavy rod with like 20 or 30 pound test line and casting as far out as you can with a heavy sinker and bait. And then most of the fishing is literally sitting there in a beach chair watching a rod in a rod holder. You're saying like the sand spikes that we use are basically rod holders that you could drive into the sand, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And typically you had 2 rods.
Yeah. I would say I definitely surf fished there with a surf rod, but I think a lot of times you and I, Mike, would just take a much smaller rod with a float, a bobber, and a minnow. We'd catch minnows in the canal and use them, live minnows for bait. Killifish. Not that we didn't surf fish at all, but I think we fished that way as much as we fished with a surf rod.
Yeah. You think so? As much?
I don't know. I know I fished. I would almost always rather fish that way. It was a little more active. I think a lot of times we would take 2 rods down there and we'd throw a surf rod out, and then we'd essentially stick that in the sand spike, and then we'd fish with a live minnow on a bobber. And then, if you got a hit on the surf rod, you put the other rod in the holder in the sand spike until you whether you had a fish or not, till you figured it out.
Right.
The biggest gray trout I've ever caught, I caught there. I don't think that was on a surf rod. I think that was probably on a smaller rod, fishing with a floater. I don't think I was throwing lures that time.
No, that would surprise me.
It was sort of before we really threw a lot of soft plastics like we do now.
You guys did fish for flounder a lot of times with
right close to the beach.
Close to the beach with a jig or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, talk about those species, both what we were targeting and what we caught.
Well, from the beach, we were typically targeting, honestly, when you're surf fishing, most of the time you're targeting whatever will bite. So I think there, in particular, we caught an awful lot of skates
And sand sharks.
and
sure did.
sand sharks. But you would occasionally catch a flounder. You'd occasionally catch gray sea trout. Occasionally catch bluefish. What else you think, Dad?
Couple stripers.
Oh yeah, we did catch small stripers at times.
The best one I ever had, I caught on a half a crab.
I don't remember a whole lot of other species.
I don't know if you call it catching. I think especially the year that we rented the place for May, horseshoe crabs.
Yeah.
You catch horseshoe crabs.
Right. Certainly not what we were targeting. Yeah. I mean, I remember a lot of small sharks, a couple different species. I think most of them were probably dogfish, some other species. Every now and then you'd catch a little bit bigger one, but we never really caught any big sharks there that I remember.
No. Maybe we just didn't land them too.
I don't remember if we ever caught any cow nose rays there, the big rays.
I remember lots of skates.
Yeah. Lots of skates for sure.
And maybe a couple other different kinds of small rays.
But we were really kind of targeting bluefish and flounder most of the time, and then at certain times of the year, stripers.
Yeah, and sea trout.
Yeah, and sea trout. And there
times when the sea trout fishing was, short, either trips where it was really good or even just 1 hour of the day every once in a while, it seemed like they were there.
Right. And there are two really common species of sea trout that we've talked about both of them, but then, and I don't know if it's changed now, but then you didn't catch speckled sea trout there. We only caught gray trout or weak fish, right?
Right.
Yeah, I still don't think they're quite that far north, the specks.
Yeah, I don't have any idea. I think you're right. I mean, the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay is quite a bit farther south than the mouth of the Delaware Bay. And then, Dad, I guess talk a little bit about Dave Arnold and the history there.
Well, Dave was a friend that I met through our wives. Wives both worked at the VA hospital at that time and said they thought we'd have a lot of things in common. So we went to
you guys, they set you up on a date.
They had four of us, and it started from there. So spent a lot of time with Dave in a lot of places fishing. He usually had bigger boats. There's a lot of boat stories that could go with Dave.
There's a lot of boat stories.
Well, were you guys already hanging out when Dave bought the center console?
Yes, that was his second boat. Matt remembers his first boat. After Dave sold it, he almost got pulled off the front of it, fishing the rocks.
Oh yeah, that was with
Jack
Tobias.
Oh, he sold that to Jack Tobias?
Yeah, he sold that to Jack, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's a story in itself.
There's a story.
Yeah, there's a Jack Tobias. There's a lot of stories there too.
But yeah, I mean, Dave had the boat that I remember growing up with Dave was a 1976 21-foot Starcraft aluminum center console.
And originally with a 70 horsepower Chrysler on.
Right.
Never ran right. Never. That thing broke down more often than it worked.
Well, if we want to get into Dave's stories, we're going to get away from Broadkill.
Yeah, well, right. There's probably a whole episode. We should try to get Dave on for an episode because on top of being a dear family friend and a great guy, he's also hilarious. And I really loved all of the time that we spent fishing with Dave when we were kids. And I really fell in love with that boat of his. So much so that I now own that boat. Which has been repowered and refurbished at least once, but maybe still it's got some quirks, I'll say. But anyway, so Dave joined us down there quite often. I mean, Dave and his wife and his sons. He has two sons, Matt and Dave. They were there a lot, right, Dad?
Yeah, pretty often.
With Dave's boat, I mean, we fished with other boats there out on the bay, but with Dave's boat, we spent quite a bit of time out on the bay. And I guess somebody described that a little bit. like what that fishing was and what it was like and where it was.
Well,
Depends on the time of year.
I think the earliest thing, and I talked a little bit earlier about things being cyclic. There was a time when I started fishing with Dave, the big thing we went for were what was called weak fish back then, which are the gray trout, which at that time, for some reason, they got really large. It was not unusual to get a 10-pounder. And you would go to the bay, and it's not unusual. Usually you come home with whatever the limit were, 3 or 4 or 5 that were 5 to 7 pounds. I mean, that was just typical for some reason for a 3 or 4 year period that I remember.
Those are
They were never that big before, and they've never averaged that big since. I don't know why that was, but that's kind of what we started fishing with Dave. And then the next big thing I think that came along when we found out about the tog fishing. And we would go down. There were times when I took the mirror craft down, and we fished off the mirror craft, and Dave fished off of his boat. We had that many people fishing off of it. But I mean, I think you guys all fished for tog off of Dave's boat.
Yeah.
I particularly remember Mark fishing off of it because he's the only guy I ever saw get green. Didn't throw up.
And recover.
Well, he let him out in the rocks that time.
No, I don't think he got out of the boat.
But he somehow recovered and went to fishing like it didn't bother him. I never saw anyone else do that with season.
I remember.
But he was actually green.
I would just like to say the captain in Alaska told me when we were in Alaska, the captain on the boat there said, I've never seen anybody get that green and not throw up. So I have a knack for it.
Yeah, he must. So
Yeah.
I don't get seasick if we're catching fish.
But the tog fishing was especially interesting. We would go down on a Friday night, and like I kind of mentioned earlier, we would go out onto the pier at Lou's and catch crabs, mostly speckled crabs for bait, and get hermit crabs and different things, whatever else we would catch, But that's what our typical bait was. That and sand fleas. But
yeah, well, I wanted to get the tog fishing, but I kind of wanted to talk about the drift fishing out there.
Well,
the normal summertime stuff that we did and the focus of that.
Well, and the other thing, like you're saying, mentioned is drift fishing, which is basically usually the main thing you're drift fishing for, I would say, is probably flounder. But anything else that you could catch, trout, bluefish, and of course you catch sharks and skates. And I mean, it was always good to go down there. You'd think you could catch like a dozen or 15 different things if you went down for 3 or 4 days. I'm not talking about sea robins and different things like that, blowfish,
oyster crackers,
crackers.
What were
little black sea bass?
What were you drifting over then? Or did you have like
basic
the rock
sand.
Piles, or
We were just following the wall. We were along the wall. Yeah.
Talk about that. Talk about the place.
Well, so they built how long do you think that wall was? Long, a mile.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know if it's that long, but they have a big, long seawall built. It's essentially to break the waves for that, I assume.
For the ferry.
For the ferry. And then they also have 3 rock piles that we thought were for ice breaking, but have recently discovered.
Before this podcast started, we looked it up and found out that they're not icebreakers.
So we would essentially drift around the wall, either try to drift parallel with the wall or between the rock piles. And of course, they created structure and held, a variety of various species of fish. Now, typically at that, I think we were really sort of targeting flounder when we were doing that.
Well, right outside the wall, on the one end of the wall, perpendicular to the wall, was a patch for some reason where the bottom got shallower.
There was a hump.
Yeah, we call it a hump, and we'd always want to fish over that hump because on the downside of the hump, a lot of times the flounder would hang there to try to intercept anything that went over there when the water got a little rougher.
Yeah, the flounder were laying on the depending on which way the tide was going, on the downstream side of that hump, basically looking for bait being washed over the top of them, right?
Right.
And you say drift fishing is literally based on whichever way the tide's going, you're running up tide or up current of where you want to fish, stopping the boat and drifting so that we would drop a 2 or even a 3 hook rig. A lot of times we'd fish a bucktail on the bottom, a big like 1.5 ounce, 2 ounce bucktail on the bottom with 2 hooks above that. And you literally drop it down to the bottom and drift along so that the bucktail is hopping along the bottom, bouncing the bottom, and you're basically trying to drift past flounder or those other fish species you mentioned, and get bites that way. We were usually in 20 to 30 feet of water.
Well, it varied, yeah.
I don't think it was deeper than that there most of the time.
At the south end, there was a hole that was a lot deeper there. Yeah, I mean, that's what you would look for. And it's just like bass fishing. It kind of, we would look for the structure, something that was a little different. And a lot of times that's where they were.
And those rock piles you talk about, Matt, they call those the haystacks, right?
Yeah, I guess they just sort of look like bales of hay stacked up because the blocks are pretty square.
And are there only 3 of them?
Are there 2 or 3, Dad?
Oh, I would have guessed there's 4.
I thought there were. In my mind, I thought there were 3, but in all reality, it's been a long time since we've been down there.
So then that was kind of the drift fishing out there, Dad. There's another species of fish that we targeted there that you mentioned, which are tog or tautog or blackfish, right?
Blackfish, yes.
And I guess talk about them a little bit. Well, like what are they and how big they get and where they live?
Well, I think a 10-pounder is kind of a really large one. Everybody kind of wants to catch a 10-pounder, but they are, and I don't know the exact thing, but a 10-pounder could be 25 or 30 years old. So they're fish that live really long. And I think when we started fishing, there wasn't a lot of pressure on them, like there seems to be today. There weren't a lot of regulations on them and how big they had to be or how many you could catch or any. I don't think there were seasons. And it really, where we first caught them were at Indian River Inlet. And we would catch these with sand fleas and things like that. You typically catch one that was, I don't know, it didn't weigh a pound. They were small, and much smaller than that even. So we didn't think much about it, but then we found out that people were, and we saw every once in a while somebody would catch a nice one in Indian River. And then we found out that they were catching them up around the haystacks or rock piles, the icebreakers, whatever you call it, and also along the wall that Matt mentioned earlier there at the Lewes Inlet. And so we started fishing for them. And in the beginning, we really did well. I mean, you catch a cooler full of them. Typically, we would go in the fall, and we would catch crabs, or speckled crabs, or bispeckled crabs and sand fleas. And you go out, at kind of an interesting thing. The first thing you would do is set a sand anchor that was maybe 100 yards, if you had that much line, out from the wall and get it really caught well in the sand. And then you motored in close to the wall, close enough that you could throw something up in the wall on a line that got wedged in the rocks. And then you could pull yourself in and out that way. And you would fish, depending on what the rock structure was like, but you would fish with the front of the boat being 10 or 15 feet off the wall. And you would drop just about straight down usually and fish that way. And you could be in 15, 20 feet of water there.
Yeah, and the reason that you're saying about anchoring up and being close to the wall or close to the haystack, close to the rocks, is because tog live in structure. They're a reef fish.
Yes, and I think they chomp on the barnacles and things like that are in the rocks. That's their main.
Mark, describe the facial structure of a tog.
Oh, they're ugly. They kind of have like white puffy lips and buck teeth.
Right. They almost look like they have 2 human buck teeth in the front, right?
Yeah. Right.
Because like Dad's saying, they eat barnacles and they eat other hard stuff.
Yeah.
Crabs, or Dad, you mentioned sand fleas. I think this is one of those things that might surprise a lot of people that go to the beach in that area. I don't know. I'm pretty sure they're pretty widely distributed. But when we were going there to Broadkill, if you went out in the surf, right at the surf line, right where the waves were breaking, and you dug down with a shovel and then ran all that stuff through a sieve, you would often end up with many of these small critters called a sand flea, right?
Yeah, I think I've heard them called like mole crabs and different things like that, but we always referred to them as sand fleas. And if you go into the bait shops or anything, it's sand fleas.
Right. There, at least the common name for them is sand flea. And you're right. They are a mole crab. They're a crustacean that lives in the sand. And they're about what? How big would a big one be?
Maybe an inch or
inches long and about half that round.
And they're almost like bullet shaped.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like football shaped. They're like little footballs, basically. Yeah. Right? And they are a favorite food of tog, and also very easy to catch.
Yeah.
Kind of an ideal bait.
I mean, from the time I was a kid going to the beach, that's one of my favorite things. If I was on the beach, I was catching sand fleas. I mean, right. You don't need a shovel. You can dig down with your hand. If you really watch, you can see them coming in and out with the surf. I mean, they'll come in the surf and you'll see one, and they dig into the sand really fast. You had to be quick to get them in the soft sand so you get them fast enough.
Yeah, they can burrow really fast.
Right.
But it probably also was good, like if you wanted sand fleas, you could turn us loose and tell us to catch sand fleas, and we'd bring you a bucket of them.
Yeah, I mean, you had fun catching them. I mean, I always did. I think you guys did too.
For sure. And then the other, you kind of described there, Dad, the technique for anchoring and positioning a boat to catch tog, which is basically to set a sand anchor out the back of the boat and then something out the front that you throw up into the rocks, right? And that allows you to hold one position in a very stable manner, not to swing around on the anchor.
Yes.
And Matt, why is that memorable?
Well, we were down, and for some reason, I drew the short straw, maybe. I'm not sure how you'd put it. I ended up with Jack in his boat, and I don't know who else was in the boat with us, but whoever else was in the boat with Jack and I didn't have any boating experience. So he had me setting the sand anchor. The problem with that was he didn't have enough rope. So he got to within 10 or 20 yards of where he really wanted to be, to the seawall. And actually, before that, we ran out of rope, the first rope. So he tied two anchors together. So he had a sand anchor on each end, and one was out the back, and the other one I was holding.
You still didn't have enough rope.
So he still didn't have enough rope. So he's revving the boat to try to get close enough so that the person in the front could throw the anchor into the anchor into the rocks. And while he's revving, I'm standing holding the rope at the back of the boat, and he's essentially pulling me out of the back of the boat, pulling the anchor.
And at the same time, the current is trying to wash you.
And he's also yelling at me because he's telling me that he needs more rope. Well, I don't really have much control over that.
There is no more rope.
I only stretch so far. It was this was like a half an hour ordeal. And the whole time that's going on, Dave with probably you.
I was there.
Yeah, we're already catching fish, right next to where we were trying to anchor.
We were observing this with a fair amount of mirth.
Yeah, I was. So all I wanted to do at that point was I just wanted to be in the other boat fishing.
I was hoping that Matt was smart enough when he got pulled off the boat with the anchor, he'd let go of the anchor.
Well, I would have let go. I would have gotten in trouble for that too.
Yeah, probably.
It wasn't just that time. It was a thing that very often it sounds easy and it wasn't. The sand anchor wouldn't hold, and then you didn't quite have enough rope, and then you had to throw something up into the rocks. So You had to have somebody that could throw it fairly well, you know what I mean? And that didn't always get caught. So it wasn't an easy process sometimes.
No.
Yeah, I remember, that time I remember a lot of yelling from everybody on the boat. I think that there was quite a heated conversation between Jack and the guy in the front of the boat as well.
Yes.
But I generally remember this process being sort of nerve-wracking. Is that fair, Dad?
That is correct. Yes, that's fair.
And directly proportional to how hard the tide was running and how big the waves were based on weather, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But it was important because you basically wanted to fish straight down. These tog, are basically living in the cracks in these rocks. We talk about this breakwater, the seawall. It's made out of, I don't know, how big are those rocks? 4 by 8 feet?
The size of cars.
Right. And they're down in those rocks, and you want to fish very accurately. And a tog, when you hook them, they vigorously try to get back into the rocks. Right?
Yeah. They are one of the hardest fighting fish for the first, 30 seconds it's amazing how hard a 5-pound tog can pull.
Right. Like pull the rod out of your hand if you're not paying attention.
Out of a boat.
And then on top of that, the way that they bite, it's very hard to hook them. They bite very light.
Yeah. I think the first time that I went tog fishing, and it was one of the few times that Pop Grant was out, he was out with us. And he looked at me after I had missed a few and told me that he looked at me and said, "You need to set the hook just before they hit."
Right. This is actually my favorite fishing quote of all time about this kind of thing, which was, I always tell it as Pop Grant would say, that the secret to catching a tog is to set the hook just before you feel the bite.
Yeah, that's what he would say.
Right. Because, literally, like, you'd have a pretty big chunk of crab on, and you feel this lightest dit kind of hit, like a little bluegill hitting, just dit.
And your crab is gone.
Completely gone. So, basically, if you felt that, you may as well reel in because you needed the bait. You needed more bait.
It was an interesting thing, like you're saying that, and typically you'd feel that, and you, of course, would jerk, and typically there was nothing there. Every once in a while, there would be a fish on, and then it would be like Matt said, it kind of almost surprised you. It felt like you were hung up at first, and then the rod took a dive, and he was trying to get back into the rocks.
Right. Yeah, I really think that was one of the more memorable fishing experiences of my childhood, just because of, like, as a kid, I feel like I was young enough, like, you don't really know what's going on. I was really gung-ho about being out there. I always remember, Dad, you and Dave kind of like talking about the conditions, and obviously on calm days, there was no conversation about whether we were going or not. But, like, if there was any amount of weather, you guys really wrestling over whether you should go or not. And then kind of maybe even sometimes starting out there and being like, no, this isn't going to work. And me always feeling like, man, this is so annoying. I just want to go fishing. I don't know what's wrong with these guys. And now, obviously, with the benefit of hindsight in adulthood, I'm like, oh, yeah, I get it. I remember that feeling about tog fishing, like up until the point when you got the anchor set up, and we were in the spot we wanted, that there was always kind of a tension around that really made it exciting. I don't know if you guys remember that or not, but that's kind of my memory of it.
Well, I always felt better once we were anchored up.
Yeah.
There were a lot of stories that went with it. There were a lot of things that we did. One of the most memorable things, and that was an educational experience. One time it was foggy, and we decided, okay, we can use the compass, and we know what angle we wanted to get, and we'll go out and we'll hit the middle of the wall. Well, if you ever run for a long way in the fog, and you know which way you're going, we're going and think, well, we want to be hitting the wall. Oh, there it is coming through the fog. We got close to it and it went, womp. We almost ran into the ferry in the fog.
Yeah, you got to be careful with that.
Yeah, that was kind of scary.
We almost got hit by a float plane in Alaska with Dave Arnold in the fog. Do you remember that?
Did I
Davey and I almost got hit by a ferry in Alaska.
The
steering cable broke in the boat we were in.
Another set of stories for another episode for sure. I guess I wanted to ask, Mark, do you have any particularly memorable, like, individual fish? Like, do you remember any individual fish from our days at Broadkill?
Most of my memories are of tog fishing there at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, Broadkill kind of ended for us after Pop Grant passed away. We shifted gears. We didn't go down there that much after that, if I remember correctly.
Oh, I think the big thing was they sold the place we stayed at.
Yeah, they did. They sold the place we stayed at.
We actually did stay at another place, but it wasn't quite as set up as well for the family as the place that we rented it for.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we started going to Hatteras.
Mm-hmm.
And so Broadkill went this side. But yeah, almost all my memories were of catching sharks and skates in the surf and tog fishing. Tog fishing, cutting my teeth in a boat was when it was, tog fishing.
Dad, what about you? I mean, I'm kind of leading to something here because there's two fish that I really specifically have a particular memory of, but anything stand out to you?
I think the one that stood out to me because it was different, I think I mentioned it earlier, I caught a pretty good striper one time on a half a crab. I don't remember how big it was, 10, 12 pounds or something like that, but big for there.
Yeah.
I don't know. What are you thinking?
Well, I'm getting to Matt. Any of your catches there that you specifically recall?
There's two in particular.
I think they're probably the same two as mine.
Maybe not, because I don't know if you were there for the. So one of them is were you there when I caught the angel shark?
Yes.
That's one of the two. That at the time was by far the biggest fish I had ever landed.
So we were drifting on the outside of the wall, is my memory of this, and it was just you and Dad and I.
Yeah, I didn't remember if you were there or not, but yes.
I was.
And we're fishing now, and I think I maybe only had 10-pound test line with, we used to either put 30 or 40-pound test leader when we tied our rigs, and really essentially a rod that was probably better designed for bass fishing than it was for what we were even doing.
Yep.
And we caught that fish for a pretty long time. But I think the memorable part is when we got it to the boat. Do you remember we tried to make a gaff out of an oar and a big hook?
And when you say we fought it for a long time, you fought it for a long time.
Right. Not knowing what it was, of course.
Right. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That fish was probably 5 foot long? Probably weighed close to 100 pounds?
Yeah, I would have said 75 pounds, something like that.
I mean, it was a big fish by far the biggest thing I'd ever caught at that time.
Right. It was an angel shark, which is also sometimes called a monk fish.
Yes.
And if you've never seen one of these things, it's worth looking them up. Unfortunately, we don't have a picture to post on the website. That's another part of the story. But it's a shark species that is, in the fish biology business, we would say is dorsally compressed. So it's got like a normal orientation of fins, not like a flounder, but it is flattened kind of like a flounder. So it's a shark that lays on the bottom, belly on the bottom, and feeds up. And it's got this set of jaws that, like, it can really, like, a lot of sharks can extend their jaws some, right? But do you remember when we got that thing up next to the boat and we were trying to gaff it, like shooting its jaws out?
Yeah, and snapping at you.
Yeah, it was terrifying looking.
It really was.
But
we never did get it in. We actually never got it in the boat, which was probably a good thing.
Well, maybe.
We didn't get it in the boat, right?
I thought we did, but I don't. I thought we got it in the boat eventually, but I don't recall. Maybe we didn't. And we had no idea what it was, right?
No, we had absolutely no idea what it was at
I
the
mean,
time.
we kind of knew it was a shark, but it was something really unusual.
Yeah, it definitely was not a species of shark that I probably at that time even really knew existed.
Right. And then what I remember about identifying it is that we ended up, I think probably the next day, we went to the bait shop, one of the bait shops near Indian River Inlet, and they had like a chart of North Atlantic fish.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, that's it. And I remember the guy at the bait shop being a little bit incredulous, like,
Yeah, right.
yeah, right.
That is
But,
what he was like. Essentially,
I mean, far and away, that is the most memorable fish
mm-hmm.
that I remember being part of catching down there.
Yeah.
And then I think I also know what your other one is. You already mentioned it, right?
I caught a gray trout off the beat right in front of the house one time that, I don't know, probably close to 10 pounds would be my guess.
Yeah.
30-some inches. I remember it was over 30 inches. And everybody was mad at me because the local pizza shop was running some sort of fishing thing where if you brought in the biggest whatever, they gave you a free pizza, and I refused to go.
Yeah, no, they were specific. They specifically had a trout contest that weekend, and like if you caught the biggest trout, you got free pizza, and you would not take the fish in.
No.
Yeah,
I like to catch the fish. I don't like to brag.
uh huh. You didn't like attention on you when you were a kid.
No.
I mean, maybe you don't anymore.
I still don't really love it, if I'm being
Right.
honest.
Well, it's a good reason to start a podcast.
Yeah.
Is there any fish that you caught, Mike, that stick out?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I feel like I remember a few flounder that we caught from the beach that were keepers, because we caught a lot of small flounder there, and they usually weren't keepers. But I remember being real proud. You and I would occasionally catch a keeper flounder, but I do actually, Dad, I remember that big striper that you caught because it was unusual. But no, I mean, I like tog fishing, and I have a lot of good memories from tog fishing, but mostly what I remember was I loved to drift fish out there. I just plain loved that kind of fishing. And
that's definitely where we got our start on that.
Right. And, in part because I'll borrow a wine term, it's approachable. It's like if you're a kid, it's pretty simple to be like, all right, let this out, drop this down until the line stops going out, and then close the bail, and we're just going to drift along, and all you got to do is hold onto the rod, and you should feel it bumping on the bottom, and if something really pulls on it, set the hook, and that was kind of how it worked. And there were times where it was tough, or we didn't catch a lot of fish, or maybe the bites were more subtle and we missed them as kids. But mostly I just really remember feeling like I was part of it, that it wasn't like some big advantage of being able to cast far. I mean, like in surf fishing, being able to cast far, cast accurately was helpful, but out there on the boat, it was something that you could really do and be part of. And I loved every bit of it. I loved running out there when there was a little bit of chop and laying on the front, up on the front of the boat with kind of bouncing around. I liked everything about it.
And when you say on the front of the boat, you don't mean on the bow, you mean on the casting platform.
Yes, I do not mean that we were allowed to ride up on the bow where it would have been dangerous, but I mean
no one should ever ride on the bow.
Right. We rode in front of the center console. But yeah, I don't know. I just left an impression on me, and I suspect it did on you too, Mark.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's, again, where I cut my teeth, where I got the bug to do it.
Right.
We discussed in previous podcasts, saltwater fishing is my favorite fishing to do.
Right, and why you now own an even bigger center console Pro line.
Right.
Yep. There's kind of just a handful of stories that I wanted to tell. It's Broadkill is a really cool area too, because it's essentially immediately adjacent to Prime Hook National Wildlife Refuge, right, Dad?
Correct.
And that's the first place I ever remember seeing big flocks of snow geese, which I thought was amazing when I was a kid.
Yeah, they really were something down there.
Yeah. But it's also that part of the Delaware Bay is really ecologically important for a bunch of species, including horseshoe crabs. It's one of, if not the primary horseshoe crab breeding grounds, right?
Yeah, I think it might. It's definitely the primary breeding grounds. I don't even know if they're. I think it might be the only place they breed.
Yeah, I think you might be right. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I think you might be right. And then there's like a whole ecosystem built up around that. There's a little wading bird called a red knot that I think has one of, if not the longest migration patterns of any bird. You know, they make a huge annual migration to come there. They feed on horseshoe crab eggs, but just like a super cool area. But I bring all that up because you mentioned, Dad, we did often catch horseshoe crabs, live horseshoe crabs in our line, but there were also a lot of horseshoe crabs that would be dead and washed up on the beach, sometimes dried out, right, Matt?
Yes.
And how does that play into this? Well, what's the story that I know I want you to tell?
Well, yeah, there were a lot of horseshoe crabs dead on the beach at certain times of the year. And I don't know if it was the summertime when this happened or if it was
The summer.
Almost, I guess it probably was the summer. And we were playing wiffle ball.
I thought we were playing football.
I thought it was football.
I thought it was wiffle ball. Well, maybe that is not important to the story. I was barefoot on the beach.
As we often, almost always were.
Yeah, and I was running for some reason, one reason or another. I thought it was wiffle ball. I was running between bases, but I don't know. And I stepped on a horseshoe crab tail that was sticking straight up and down out of the sand, point first, and it broke off in the bottom of my foot.
It clenches me up. It weirds me out even now.
And if you've ever seen a horseshoe crab tail, they're pointy on the end, and then they have barbs facing back towards the crab itself. So when it goes in, it doesn't come back out.
It sort of looks like a 10 or 12-inch long sword with barbs.
Yeah.
Pointing on the end, like you're saying.
So this thing went in my foot, I don't know, fairly deep and snapped off. And now I'm, of course, I think mostly in shock initially and pain. Yep. And then we managed to get up to the porch of the house. And of course, there was a discussion about what to do, and Pop Grant was involved. So he said, "No, we don't got to take him to the hospital. I'll just pull that out with the pliers."
It's kind of interesting. It's also a hollow. So
yeah,
in there, you could look in.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, there's a hollow in there. So
he makes a nice place to grab it with a pair of pliers, right.
Too. So he grabbed the whole of this thing with the pliers and yanked a couple times. And I think he finally did say, "That's not coming out of there. You're going to have to take him to the hospital." So we get to this story gets even. So we get to the hospital where was the hospital in Lewis?
In Lewis, yeah.
Yeah. We go to the hospital in Lewis, and and some of this is a blur probably because it hurts so bad. And we go in, but one of the things I do remember is the doctor finally comes in, looks at my foot, and looks at Mom and says, "Why would you let your son be barefoot on the beach?" And I just thought to myself, well, I mean, like, how many people wear shoes? Like, I don't think I've ever worn shoes in the beach.
Right.
So they essentially did minor, numb the area. It didn't put me to sleep, but they had to cut it out of my foot. And then it might be the one and only time in my life I had crutches for anything.
Oh, I don't remember you being on crutches.
Yeah, I had crutches for like a couple of weeks.
And you're supposed to stay off the beach.
Yeah, and I wasn't supposed to go on the beach anymore that trip.
He was grumpy about that. I remember that.
Yeah, man. So, we talked a little bit about that house in Broadkill, and it was like, like Dad said, it was a 1-story house. It was 3 bedrooms or something, right, Dad?
I believe there were 4.
Okay.
Essentially a living room kitchen that was all big, one big room.
With a nice porch.
And then a screen porch.
That's where I'm getting with is about the porch, actually, but so, and I mean, you say a big kitchen and living room. I don't think there was really anything about that house that was actually all that big. It wasn't. Yeah, when I say big,
I mean it was one. The kitchen living room was all one room, essentially, right. One open room.
And we usually, I mean, when we were there, we often had a bunch of people. So it would be like us, and we were 6 people in our family. And then, you know, and Kate even talked about Broadkill the last episode before this one. Kate mentioned Broadkill. And then our cousin Davey, who we've talked about once or twice, who will get on here eventually. He would go with us, our other brother Davey.
Yeah.
And I remember, you know, friends of mine from school, like Matt Knox and some other people, and Dave Arnold and his wife and their 2 boys. And so it was always like, or it was often like,
we
were
were
stacked in there.
always packing more people in that house than it really fit.
Beth and Bob.
Right. Aunt Beth and Uncle Bob and the girl and their daughters and Pop Grant. And Pop Bud probably went sometimes, right, Dad?
I think so.
I think so. I don't think he went many times.
I don't think he went as often as he went upstate, but he definitely went some.
Yeah.
If he went, he would just sort of sit in the house and he'd either cook or I don't remember him go. He definitely didn't go fishing in the boat at all.
No. Which is kind of ironic that I wonder, that would kind of be an interesting thing to know. After Pop Bud's service in World War II, where he was 21 months without shore leave.
Yeah, I wonder if he was ever in a boat again. That I know of, no. Not offhand.
I don't have a recollection of him being in a boat.
I don't even remember him going out in the boat with us, like, you know, even upstate, or I think he just stayed in dry land after that.
Yeah, well, maybe when you spend 21 months on a boat with people trying to kill you, that's enough of that.
Yeah, probably.
Anyway, this memory that I have is probably part of the reason that we're sitting here today. Actually, we were there, and what I remember about it was the 3 of us, and our cousin Davey was there, and Dad, you were there, and Pop Grant was there, and you mentioned that screened-in porch on the bay side, on the water side of the house. There was a really nice big screened-in porch, and I don't remember. I know it was in the afternoon, and we were all out there together, and I don't know if it was windy and we weren't fishing, or if it was really hot and we were just taking some shade in the middle of the day, or if there was a storm or what was going on. But we were out there on that porch together, and at that time, Outdoor Life magazine, which, you know, we always had around when we were kids, Field and Stream and Outdoor Life, but Outdoor Life magazine, the inside the back cover of the magazine, there was a monthly article segment by an outdoor humor writer named Pat McManus. And Pat McManus was really funny and published a bunch of books, and you can look these up. But for whatever reason, we were out there that afternoon, and I had a copy of Outdoor Life, and we must have been bored or something. And I ended up reading. I was probably 12, 13 years old. I ended up reading out loud this story by Pat McManus from the back cover of Outdoor Life. And I know the story. It was a story called The Grasshopper Trap, which I still think is probably the funniest story Pat McManus ever wrote. And I remember everybody just like rolling, laughing, including Pop Grant. And I read the whole story, and when I finished it, Pop Grant said, he said something to me like, "You were really good at that." You know, he complimented me about the reading and the storytelling. And, you know, I have just often looked back on that as something that really meant a lot to me, and really, I think really helped give me a voice as a person, and ended up leading me to have some confidence in public speaking, and, you know, really probably led us collectively, and, you know, from my perspective, to start doing this podcast. And it's just a really cherished memory for me of all of us being together and Pop Grant being there, and just a special moment. So that's my last story about Broadkill, I think, for the episode. Do you guys have any other Broadkill stories? Anything that we missed that you want to tell?
Well, for me, it was important as a family place. There was no other place we've had since that the whole family could go to. Everyone enjoyed it. There were a lot of things that happened there, but the main thing was it was a family place for me and for Mom. We always had a good time there. Of course there were arguments and there were fights and there were bad times, but it was a place I think that everybody wanted to go to.
Yeah.
It was a great family place.
Right. I mean, it's funny. I'm sure there were arguments and I'm sure there were fights, but I have no recollection of any of that. I feel like my memories of Broadkill Beach, Delaware are just nothing but positive.
The one that always sticks in my head is you said about early on in the store, you could go there and buy a sweatshirt. Everybody always said if you cover the B in Broadkill, it's roadkill. So you want to go to roadkill sometime.
Yeah, I did want to mention that Broadkill. I looked up because there's another beach there close by called Slaughter Beach. And this place is called Broadkill. And I always thought there must have been some, historic battle, some Native American conflict, something like that. That's not the case at all. Broadkill, the word kill is actually probably an adaptation or a mispronunciation, I think, of the Danish word for river. And so it literally just meant broad river. And then I think the leading theory on Slaughter Beach is that it was named after a person with the last name of Slaughter. So both places sound ominous, but neither one mean anything bad.
Just out of curiosity, I've been thinking about this since the last time I was down there. We did do a day trip down there to take CJ a few years ago, and especially when we were kids, you got off of 1. And it was maybe 10 miles from 1 to Broadkill?
I don't think it's even that far.
I don't think it was that far, but it was off the main road. Yeah,
it's off the main road quite a distance. It's not a short drive from where you got off of 1 to Broadkill to the beach. But there was a pond there on the right. You guys remember that? Like 3/4 of the way in, and there was we used to go for minnows there.
Do you mean that there was a?
Well, that's what I wanted to ask.
We used to catch bass there, like largemouth bass.
Yeah, it was more of there was some kind of water control structure there. That's where you mean, Mark. It was kind of like a water control structure on I don't know what that was for, if it was for the wildlife refuge or something else, but yeah.
So that's what I remember going there to fish, but I don't remember ever actually catching anything there.
Oh, no, we caught largemouths there. We also used to crab there, which was odd. Yes. You could catch crabs and largemouth bass in the same water.
I remember crabbing there, yes.
I think it there was a little bit of a dam. It wasn't much of one.
Well, it was a gate, so the saltwater can only go so deep.
Well, it also controlled the level of the water in the wildlife refuge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember catching big crappies there one time, Matt.
Yeah.
And then I think we caught small striped bass on the downstream side of that once that I remember too.
Yeah.
Anyway, you just wanted to mention that place, Mark?
I just wondered. I always wondered. Like I said, I remember fishing it, but I don't ever remember catching fish there. I didn't know if you guys remember.
Yeah, we caught fish.
Yeah, but when we went there, the primary objective was always crabbing.
Yeah, we would go there to crab.
And then one of those misty for times past, but I think an idyllic childhood thing about that was that we would go there. And I remember Mom, particularly Matt, taking you and Davey and I there and dropping us off for hours.
Yeah, that's right.
And just being by ourselves, crabbing, hanging out, fishing, and then, and I'm sure it wasn't as long as I remember it being, but, no cell phone, no way to contact anybody, too far to walk back to town, just kind of this is it. This is, it's just us. Got to figure it out. And figuring it out was generally going home with half a bushel full of crabs to steam in Old Bay. that night.
Yeah. I think it's different times for sure now. Honestly, I can't imagine doing that with my kids.
No, I can't either. And I could also imagine now, police officer pulling up, they'd probably end up hauling your parents off to jail.
And thinking back, I talked about it was a great family place. I think it was something that instilled upon you guys. When you talk to someone else and say you're going to the beach or you're going to the shore, they thought about a boardwalk. They thought about laying on the beach somewhere with a crowd of people swimming in the salt water, and things like that. And I think you guys find that the beach could also be a nature place, where you could do the kind of things that we like. I don't remember you guys ever saying they want to go to the boardwalk.
Yeah, Aunt Beth would go to the boardwalk. She'd go down to Rehoboth some, and I hated it. I never wanted to do that.
Or you never wanted to go anywhere to lay on the beach.
I still don't want to do that.
I appreciate what you're saying, Dad. You're right. It was a whole different connection to the beach than a lot of our friends and a lot of people have, and I don't know if they feel it as deeply as I do, but it's certainly still something that is ingrained in me. That connection to saltwater and those environments.
And it's something that today is not the same. I mean, if you're familiar with like the beaches down in the Outer Banks and Cape Hatteras, you go there now and that's kind of what it's like.
Yeah, Broadkill has really turned into big homes.
Right.
All of those.
I don't know if they're all like that, but it's a lot of that.
Yeah, but there's a lot of that.
Yeah, the character of the place has changed almost entirely. And, that's neither here nor there, but it's just certainly different than it was when we were kids.
I do have one story I wanted to tell about the storm, Michael. I do remember when we were kids, one of the cool things about Broadkill was you were allowed to have fires on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
So typically, at least one night out of whatever it was, the weekend we were down there, the week we were there, we would spend the evening on the beach and have a fire. And they sold glow sticks at the corner store. Liz and I always looked forward to going to the corner store and picking out our glow sticks and getting the color we wanted. Do you remember any of this, Michael?
No.
Where this is going? Mm-mm. So this is also where we learned Michael was not going to be an engineer.
Oh no! Now I'm worried.
So there was also a saying that Aunt Beth had for Liz, and it was, "Don't let the Ruhl boys have it." If she had something she really liked, she wasn't to let the Ruhl boys have it because we would break it.
Yeah, don't let the Ruhl boys play with it; they'll break it.
Don't let the Ruhl boys have it. So I had my glow stick, and I probably was smart enough to say, "No, Michael, you're not going to take my glow stick." But you got the bright idea that you wanted to fish at night and use one of the glow sticks to cast and see how far you could cast a glow stick at night.
This all sounds like a good idea to me so far.
So you convinced Liz to use hers.
Well, that's her fault, but go on.
Her 7 or 8 year old fault.
I mean, I was only 13 or 14, but go ahead.
And so you tied some sort of knot
uh-huh.
on this glow stick.
Yep.
And you took one heck of a cast. You put everything you had into that cast. And boy, did that glow stick go far. And it did not take long for you to realize that the glow stick had become dislodged from your fishing rig. And that resulted in many tears from Liz and years of still her memory. She'll tell you when she listens to this that she remembers it because she does.
Well, sorry, Liz. I didn't mean to fling your glow stick off, but apparently I did.
On that never.
Do you think the line broke and the whole rig took off, or do you think it was just the glow stick?
I don't remember. I don't remember if the bail snapped shut and you knew immediately. It is amazing how far they fly when that bail snaps shut and you break.
Yeah, if something happens during a cast with a surf rod and you have 3 or 4 ounces of weight on the end of there, even 20-pound test just snaps. And boy, it goes forever when it does that.
You can never cast as far as you can.
Well, that's because you don't have the line going through the guides.
Right. Well, I can imagine it. I can imagine that glow stick really just going.
It really went. I remember that clearly.
Like a missile.
Yep.
Like a green glowing missile.
Oh, I'm sorry, Liz.
Don't let the Rule Boys have it.
Don't let the Rule Boys play with it. They'll break it. I'll buy you a glow stick next time I'm home. All right. Well, sure has been fun talking about the sunny slopes of yesteryear and Broadkill Beach, Delaware. It really is a special place to all of us. So thanks for taking us down there, Dad.
Thanks for going. Had a good time.
Yep. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up. Yeah, as always, you can find almost all of our content on outdoorrules.com, and we're on Facebook and on Instagram at Outdoor Rules. Like we always mention, we would really appreciate anybody leaving us a like or a comment or a follow, particularly on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Really helps other people find the show. But yeah, thanks again for listening, and thanks guys for doing this. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, we enjoy it.
All right, love you guys.
Love you too.
Love you too.
Hunting and fishing, the great outdoors, mixing history, laughter, love, and folklore, creating memories with family and friends. These are the trophies that matter in the end. Outdoor Rules.